I'm going to switch to, there we go, the Missouri Rapid Response Team, which is K0RRT. And we have Adam, who is on the right, who is KD0UCM, and Tim is on the left there, W0TSN. And are you guys ready to go?
Sure.
I'll even dim lights a little bit.
All
or
right.
turn them off accidentally. One of the two.
That sounds great. So thanks for having us out for sure. We're excited to be here. As he mentioned, my name's Adam from the Missouri Rapid Response Team. And, you know, I got involved a few years back through basically a series of coincidences, and I ended up sitting in the front seat of a truck with a fella as we worked a bicycle race. And as part of that event, sort of changed my view on ham radio. I had my ticket for a fairly short time, just less than a year, and as part of that process, I played with some VHF and talked to people I had not seen. But through this event, I was able to come together, really meet some great people that sort of changed the way I viewed the relationship I had with my ticket and with the privilege I have to operate. So that's what we're kind of here to talk a little bit about today. So the question is, what lens do you see the world through? And so we'll talk a little about that today. We'll cover some expectations that we see from our volunteers, a bit about the agency that we serve, some amateur radio role in emergency services, and some next steps. So, you know, I try to look outside to see really what do others think about the ham radio as we think about emergencies. And this was a great quote from the Administrator of Homeland Security. When everything else fails, amateur radio is oftentimes our last line of defense. When you need amateur radio, you really need them. And I think that's sort of the spirit that a lot of people kind of go in to get their ham radio license with. So, who are the RRT? Anybody who is federally licensed operator can become an RRT member. You have to basically have high will and want and drive to help others. And we're here to help in many, many ways. You can read that quote from Rudolph Giuliani, but basically, long and short is, government agencies really are starting to consider ham radio like never before, an asset like you've never seen. And so when we see folks like, the mayor in New York City, who's been through plenty of tragedy and time, certainly understands the need for emergency communication. So when he's specifically calling out ham radio operators, it certainly starts to open the eyes of some others in our government agencies. So a little background about the RRT. Came about in 2007, a brainchild of Art Goodall, W0KG, who I'm sure many of you have met, and the late Dave Collins, KC6 YNC, Dave Six as many called him. So these two guys came together and began thinking about how do we really capture the ability to have assets and people and have training and really have everyone come together to support those hams, our neighbors, that might need help. So if there's a problem in their area where they would normally come and operate and their families are impacted, how is it that we could come and help those folks in their communities? And so was born the idea of a rapid response team in the St. Charles County area and the 11 counties that circled us. That was the goal, to build a vehicle to support the emergency communications in those areas. So at that time, they set out to begin building a charter. They set out to begin rounding up some MOUs, some agreements with other areas, and so was born the RRT. Today, fast forward, we're a much more mature organization. We are part of the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Services, so this is our communications on behalf, typically of local, state, federal, or other governmental agencies. We're sponsored by FEMA and administered by the local EM. In our case, we're sponsored by the Warren County EC under RACES. So there are a number of emergency services, right? You have ARES and different groups, but RACES specifically is aligned toward more government activities. Also in our group, obviously we don't always have an emergency declared, and so we serve some NGOs. So these would be non-governmental organizations, some non-RACES activity under the ECOM strategy, right? So you've all been probably seen presentations on ECOM, so I won't go into great detail about that today. but really we're assets to really help those NGOs that are responsible for specific areas. So these would be like hospitals, Red Cross, Salvation Army, those types of organizations. So typically you would have a trained team that, let's say in a given area, maybe the PBX goes down and they need communications within that area. It's not a declared emergency, but a reason that you might need communicators at a moment's notice, certainly to begin focused on that emergency situation. So between government agencies and NGOs, what we look for are emergency communications operators that are well trained, that are knowledgeable, that are active, that are disciplined. When we think about, just flipping here to my notes, when we think about these organizations, basically, if you think about it, HAMs kind of, over the years, have been seen as kind of, by some government agencies, as sort of these kind of wild guys that are out there with radios and maybe police wannabes or something like that, and just kind of out there rogue, right? Well, certainly because of some of the great work that ham operators have done, that likely many of you have done, that image is beginning to shake, and governments are really paying attention to those assets. So as a function of that, when we're deployed, we see ourselves as a bit of a liaison to the ham community, and certainly to the government agency that we take service in. So it's taken a long time to get past that kind of image, and so we look for well-trained, knowledgeable, active people that are disciplined, that want to have a fair amount of training. So we train quite a lot. We'll talk about that today. Folks that work as an organized group. The fact of the matter is, what we find is that we believe that most hams would step up in the time of an emergency. And we also believe very, very adamantly that there are a lot of really great hams in the world. And unfortunately, the time to learn about those emergency communications, to participate as a group, is not when that emergency has happened, right? That time is to begin training and to be part of an organization, to have that training and alignment and have partnership and understand how we'll operate together. And so part of what the RRT does is to really bring that focus, that lens to the group, and make sure that we have those resources and assets ready to go, and that they're capable. So from our volunteers, in exchange for providing really great people, basically in turn we provide back some real benefits. So we look for those dependable people, but we bring back a dependable organization. We work cooperatively as a team. We have regular meetings, monthly meetings that cover all types of content. We'll talk a little about that. But everyone is accountable in the organization, and part of that participation and training, we look for those best efforts. And we're giving those best efforts to each other, because when we're operating out in the field, ultimately we rely on that kind of activity. And we'll talk about some of the areas that we operate in. Really trying to work and respect each other and serve our agency. So one team, one dream. So questions about any of that so far? Okay, good. So if you wanted to participate in something like this from an equipment perspective, we don't really go too far out of the norm. Most of our folks are able to participate with the equipment that they have. So we typically would see like a VHF Go kit, like you see there on the left. Sometimes some type of an HF Go kit, and then the small VHF handheld. So we do a couple of different events. Each of them ultimately require a little bit different equipment as we kind of go through the specific operation. So one of the things that I love about the group is that I've learned to operate in a whole different way. So like many of you, I probably did a bit of DX work. I've done a bit of digital on VHF, but with this particular group, I've spent a lot of time being able to focus on better antenna management and better deployment, faster deployment in the field, the ability to be able to do some learning from some of our other really knowledgeable hams that I probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to operate before, operating other people's equipment as they bring it out, almost like a field day at every kind of event. So really, really fun activity. And certainly starts to sort of hone my skill and hone my craft. That's what I personally get out of the organization. So Requirements-wise, from a participation perspective, in the rapid response team, we look for a successful background, a ham radio operator license. At any level, we do encourage people to get their general. That's sort of one of the things that as you get into the HF spectrum, of course, you certainly want to manage that, right? I came in as a tech, and after some mild harassing, and I managed to go squeeze out my general, and I actually feel great about it. It's one of the things I like is that accountability, and the group was certainly no shy to help me out and get through all that and really help to train. So really enjoyed that aspect of it. Again, back to that training. I also from some kind of an equipment. We talked a little bit about equipment. Participating in regular drills and events and incidents. Certainly, we look for those regular participants. Right, everybody has a life, and we understand that. But certainly, we want to have you participate. Certainly, as often as you're able. Ultimately, we do our training schedule across the course of the year on a whole variety of things, and so that's one of those things where if you miss a couple of events, you're really missing some great opportunity to learn and educate. So, but we do understand, obviously, that you have other things going in your life. Also, continuing education. So, since we focus on that training and we focus on policy and procedure. We do require that you take some FEMA training, some NIMS courses. They're listed there on the screen, and I believe that you all post these sessions online, so you'll have that content there. But we do the NIMS 100, 200, 700, 800, 802, and Level 1 ECOM. This is sort of the baseline entry, and then you certainly have opportunity to do all kinds of other training through the organization. I was able to go through also 300 and 400 level NIMS training, so some command courses, which I learned a ton of information from. Tim here is a public information officer, and I'm not sure however many other certifications and standards that he carries around with him. But it's a connection and a gateway for me to be able to have some additional education in the topic, which certainly, whether it's in our organization or just out in the real world, it's something that I've always wanted to know and I've had the opportunity to learn about. Questions about any of that? Good.
Are those
Yeah.
online courses or are they classroom?
Yeah. So
all but the MCOM one.
all but the MCOM. Yep. That's right. Yep. And they're good. There's some the NIMS classes, the 100 through 802. Have really nice online training videos. There's some job aid kind of content there, and then of course the MCOM is live training. So birds of a feather stick together. The RRT is really a training ground for that focused MCOM training, right? So Queen Elizabeth said it best, I think here. It's all to do with the training. You can do a lot if you're trained properly or if you're properly trained. And so here's an example of a typical sized group. They grow and shrink. This is the guy in the middle there is the late Dave Six chuckling away. We miss that laughter certainly in our sessions, but we do have a lot of fun. In this area, basically we do some briefing, any briefing on activities that we've had in the previous period, and then we get right into some training. Sometimes it's on documentation and knowledge around process. Sometimes we'll set up maybe some gateways and some radios, and we'll work on exchanging some digital modes of communication. Or we've been in sessions where we deployed people around the county to make sure that we had adequate coverage, and we learned some good lessons from kind of that mobile application of getting out and working. If you listen to the WB0HSI repeater, the 3.3 repeater in St. Charles, you'll probably hear a lot of our activity. We also have a net at 6:30 on Thursdays. So, as a group, we're not first responders. If there's a fire, medical emergency, anything like that, we notify the appropriate authorities. That's what we do, right? And so, there's with emergency communications particularly, there's sort of the rule of the thumb, right? You should be able to cover up the incident with your thumb. So we don't expect that people are going to be right up in there, risking life or limb. we want to be effective communicators. So to be able to have eyes on the prize, but stay at a safe distance. So I think as people think about it, how involved does one get? What's the risk here? And the reality is we want to maintain as little risk as possible and maintain as much communication as humanly possible, that clear, concise communication that we're shooting for. Yes, sir.
Can you tell the lights up front? It's a little hard to see slides.
So I am the 0.2%, a licensed ham radio operator. So we participate in events and incidents and social functions. So in an event, this is kind of any planned non-emergency activity, such as a training exercise or a public service program. An incident, any type of planned or unplanned occurrence regardless of cause, which requires action by the primary response agency to really minimize that loss of life, damaged property, or natural resources. And then those social functions that we participate in. So I threw some various pictures down on the bottom here. So the one on the far side, I'll talk about one of the events we do here in a minute, Race for the Rivers. But we deploy our operators in boats with trackers, and there's a boat captain, and we have a communicator on board, and we follow a race as it makes its way down the river with kayakers, and we offer communications and bring some folks to safety. I think this past year we had a really great kind of example of why to be there. We actually had a boater that had a major rudder problem, and she no longer had any control of her boat, and we were able to get someone there to her with one of our radio operators on board and help her work that vessel out and safely complete that race. So really great activities there.
Is that a fishing pole in the back?
That may be a fishing pole in the back. I'm not saying no.
Could be an antenna.
So kind of some events that we typically do each year. We do Celebrate St. Peter's, the Race for the River, the Cystic Fibrosis Ride, and then this year as an example, we worked some eclipse viewing activity. So Celebrate St. Peter's is one of my favorite events. It's where we end up in the face of the public quite a lot. So at Celebrate St. Peter's, we manage all of the transportation that is occurring there, the mass transit. So we have an operator in each of the buses. We have a net control that's managing the flow of those buses. We have folks on the ground at the loading zones to make sure that we have safety there. And we generally maintain a really safe movement of people. If anything were to ever happen in the event, in the venue, we would be able to move folks in and out quickly and move those transportation assets quickly. Also, eyes and ears for safety, right? So we had an incident a few years back where we had radio operators on the ground at the loading zones, and the bus was about ready to take off as a young man was running towards the bus, and he fell and landed right in front of the bus tires, and our radio operator was able to scream stop into the radio, and since we have operators on each of the buses, that bus immediately stopped, and the young guy didn't get run over. So super important to have folks with eyes and radios pretty much in these major events. In the Race for the River, I mentioned that earlier, but we cover from down in Washington all the way to the St. Charles riverfront. There's a boating event that we cover. So I think we have three hops of APRS repeaters along the way.
Yeah.
And so quite an infrastructure. We have people positioned all over on different high hills, and we manage the communication along that boat route, and then subsequently in the park. We also have folks like Shadows that follow the leadership of that organization to make sure that they have eyes and ears on all the activity and safety. We have folks that are planted on bridges along the way to make sure that the boaters are making their way. So a really fantastic event, a very big communications event, and literally hundreds of athletes that are in an event like this that we're trying to maintain communications for and with. And the Eclipse this year was part of our serve agency's activities, and so basically we were deployed around the county as a function of providing eyes and ears on traffic flow, as well as making sure that just generally things were well. So we were deployed around the county in case, you know, I think a lot of them, as you saw in the news, a lot of the emergency agencies were very concerned that we would have people problems on the day of the eclipse. Fortunately, everything went very well, but we communicated around the county, providing updates to our to the emergency command center in the county, to the emergency EC. So, really great event, and as you kind of see it through here, you see the command trailer in the top right corner there, and one of our buses that we man, and another example of this was a briefing for that event. So very well organized group of folks that are really doing some good work. Capabilities wise, quite frankly, the capabilities are our people, and that's what, as we come in today, that I really want to, you know, make everyone aware of the organization. If it's something that's interesting to you, you know, we would love to have you participate. We see our people, highly trained, effective communicators, about 50 active employees today, members today. And we also have a mobile communications trailer, with about 15 minutes to on-air capabilities once we get on site, with HF communications, VHF communications in a variety of ways, a number of voice and digital modes available right there in the trailer, as well as our relationships and MOUs with the operating organizations that we serve. In addition to that, we also have a ton of situational awareness capabilities. So I mentioned some of the APRS activities earlier. So from a fleet of APRS trackers and equipment, in our trailer, as you can see in the top right corner there, we have the capabilities to track those assets around. So I mentioned the bicycle ride, the cystic fibrosis ride. This year, as we were making our way through the ride, about halfway through, we had a severe line of inclement weather that rolled up on us. And we had bicyclers that were on a 100-mile route, a circular route, that were being rapidly chased by some very severe weather. And so because of the equipment that we deployed as part of this volunteer process, we were actually able to get those SAG vehicles and these emergency different groups that we had staged around the route focused in the right areas to get some support to those riders so they could get through quickly and were notified whether they chose to ride or whether we helped SAG them in to make sure that they weren't caught up in that severe storm. And then we were able to account for everyone through our communicators that were both at the rest stations along the way as well as posted in those SAG vehicles. So really excellent example of utilizing that situational awareness and the team communications that we have and the processes that we've trained for, really to get out there and help protect those that we were really served to help. So outstanding activity by our communicators and a good example of the capabilities that we bring to bear here along the way. So from a call to action perspective, if this is something that you're interested in, if you'd like to know more about the RRT, you can catch us at our website at www.k0rrt.org, or you can reach out to one of our leaders. I've got Tim and Lon Aylsworth addressed there. So as the leaders of the group, Tim's here with us today. Lon had to get some surgery, so he's down for the count, but he'll be back online shortly. In the top right corner, you'll see if you go to our website, there's a Contact Us link. You can fill out your information there, and we'll make sure that we reach out to you and get you some more information. We've also printed some flyers and placed them on the table over there so that you can take those home with you and have a reminder of that URL. So I hope that our short presentation here today helped you kind of see communication through a different lens. What kind of things are out there? What are the possibilities? And ultimately, how do we help you get a little bit more out of your radio ticket? So I'll open it up for any additional questions or things you'd like to know today.
What 11 counties?
Yeah, good question. These. So back then, quite honestly, it was the 11 counties directly that connected St. Charles, and it's connected to St. Charles and St. Louis counties, those District C counties.
Now that we're not part of District C, in Aries, realistically, they've, should you stand up, Ken? We can't
Sure.
hear you. realistically, they've asked us to be prepared to really go anywhere in the state if needed. So it's all going to depend on what kind of volunteers we have available to take that kind of need if we need it. Things like that. So realistically, we look at the ones closest to St. Charles and St. Louis, and still staying in Missouri though. At this time.
Yeah, Cliff.
I mistakenly referred to this previously as the St. Charles Rapid Response Team, but in my conversation with Lon, I guess maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago before we went to the hospital, he gave me the website and I said, hey, wait a minute, it's Missouri Rapid Response Team. So it is not St. Charles. You got people in Missouri, in St. Charles County, St.
Right.
Louis County, Franklin County, Washington County, all part of the team, right?
Right. We have several members that are in your club in St. Louis. Christy's one of our wonderful members, and you're only as good as your crew. And we've got some just fantastic people, and when you lead one of these events, one of mine that I get tasked with is the Race for the Rivers. I had 26 people that, if they had done such a tremendous job, our served agency, which is the Greenway people trying to raise money to clean the rivers up. Just her comment to me was, I didn't know how much I needed you until I had you, and now I can't imagine having to do this without you. And our Celebrate St. Peter's, we work for the police department, and her comment, which is one of the officers, said that you let cops be cops. So it takes a load off of them and gives them eyes where they need it. One of the first things we had to run into with Race for the Rivers is there's a barge on the river. It's not something that goes good with kayaks. And luckily with all those eyes out there, within 10 minutes we had eyes on that and we knew where it was, and thank goodness he was ahead of the crowd. So it was going to clear out before the boats got into the river. So pretty much, like I said, it's the people that make the team what it is. And everyone brings a little bit different talents to them, and that's what's great about it is the collective. Everybody learns off everybody. We've got some senior people that's been around that tell us all kinds of stories, but they're there when you ask them, well, if I put this antenna, will I be able to get out? And they'll say, well, you'll be pounding the ground very well with RF. So you've got those resources out there, and that's what makes it such a great team.
Yeah.
What frequency do you typically use? And you said you prefer people as general or above. So obviously that means that more of your time you're using HF sounds than you make after VHF. So I would assume you're using a stateside frequency like 40 or 80.
It all depends on what the event is. Sometimes we're just doing exercise routine with Jeff City. The only way you're going to get from St. Louis to Jeff City typically is with HF, and that's where we're looking for that general ticket. But there's not a specific frequencies that we tend to use. We use 80, we use 40 a lot, but like Race for the Rivers, we didn't use HF. St. Peter's Day, all VHF.
Okay.
So people come, all they have is an HT. So the great thing is we have such a group of people that you're able to fill all those holes. So if, like his first time out there, he got matched up with a guy with a rig in his car. So you just kind of fill those voids. So no matter what your talents are, usually we can use you.
That's right.
I just want to say, I learned a lot about my equipment being on the team that I wouldn't have been able to do, sit in a car doing nets and things like that is typically what I did. And the drills that we do before the events, we make a lot of dumb mistakes, but when we get out there, then we've learned and we're not making the mistakes in the event where we're needed the most. And like I said, I use Bofang, I use LiDAR, I love it, I have 2 or 3 of them. And I never programmed it on a computer because I forced myself to learn how to program it manually, because if I'm out in the field, I can't pull up a laptop and do my stuff. So it's just, and things broke down, I learned how to fix them. And we've had to, rig up some things because we didn't have what we needed. It just really teaches you a lot about your equipment, and it's fun. We pretty much have to think about what we're learning all the time. Every time we do that, we're learning something new.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, we had one day where that was the program of the day was teach people how to use their own equipment. But the thing is, we have enough people that know the equipment that they became the teachers. So, okay, who's got a bow thing? Put those groups together. Who's got a Kenwood? Put them together. And they helped each other learn how to program a frequency into their HT or whatever. You kind of move on from there.
So you mentioned people show up and they might just have an HT. How are you guys doing AVRS? What does that equipment look like? Are you guys distributing that, or is that something that people bring?
A little bit of both.
Both, yeah.
The RT has 3 trackers that we have that we can lend out as needed. On Race for the Rivers, we had 2 trackers in the boats, and we had 2 people with 700s that used their own radio to do the APRS. The Digipeters, one was Lon's house, so we set it up in his house, and that was one of his places. We had one guy in Pine Lake Park. He used one of my Go Kits, and
I was up at the
Dave
hill.
was in my truck being the Digipeter across the river to get us that last hop into the park. So we've kind of learned to kind of analyze the terrain. One of the activities we had one day was to send people out with their HTs, and we're only supposed to use their HTs, to find out what kind of challenges they had. How far could you get with your HT? And what kind of environment, hills and valleys are going to give you a problem, and those kind of things. So it kind of brings everything to light. Oh, that's what that means. And helps people, learn more about hand radio and have fun doing it with the big
Right.
thing. If this wasn't fun, I wouldn't have been here for the past 9 years.
That's right.
Things like that.
And how to relay like that, like on that event, that was a great one. People just kind of stop and think, communication's so clear because you're working off of a repeater or something. If that repeater's not available, how do you manage that, and how far apart can you be, and what about the topography, and just kind of really get you thinking and become a more versatile operator. That's the best part about it. All right.
There's some limitations. Everything has a limitation. You just got to find out where those gaps are and where the best way to use them.
Yeah.
And that's part of the crew, that the knowledge that they have and the sharing of the knowledge is the big thing, and making it fun. Any other questions?
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right, so while they're getting things packed up there, we're going to switch modes. We have an election tonight, and we're also going to go through our other parts of the business. I am not running for president, so I'm going to run the election.